I was 18, 19 years old, first bid, and going to prison for robbing houses. And I'm sitting in a confinement cell. I just fought somebody, and I'm alone in this confinement cell. And I was like, man, this really sucks. This sucks bad. Like, what if I just end it? I was like, all right, if you're gonna end it, how do we do this?
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition, a podcast about making the most of the changes we're given. As a married father of 3 teenagers, a longtime global business executive and adventurer, I've been through hundreds of transitions in my life. Many have been difficult, but all have led to a depth and richness I could never have imagined. You'll get to hear all about them on this podcast so that together we can create more love and joy in our lives, no matter what transitions we are going through. Well, I'm really excited to have Jake Cortez joining us today. He is a very successful investor, having raised over $12 million in capital, a successful speaker and entrepreneur with over $50 million in sales. I'm really inspired by you, Jake, by the way you used your time in prison to transform your life onto the current path that it's on. So very big welcome to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks. I'm jumping right in. Like, what do you consider in this whole story, which is an amazing one I know a little bit about from our earlier conversations, but what would you consider as the highest impact or most meaningful transition that you've been through in your life, Jake?
Well, I would say God pulling me out of the mess that I had created when I tried to forge my own path and veer off my the beliefs that I was raised with, I was from 0 to 7 years old, perfect childhood, right? Like everything was great, parents getting along. I have 2 younger brothers and a younger sister, so we had a strong sense of camaraderie. With so much love in our family. My mom, my grandma, my great-grandma, my great-grandma, like I had 4 generations of women to welcome me into the world. Like, I mean, that's, you cannot compete with that. And these are God-fearing women. So I had a very strong base. I was a very hyperactive child, maybe sometimes a little mischievous, but nothing devious, just kind of like wanting to explore the world, wanting to, and I definitely wasn't the child that colored between the lines. I was just doing my own thing. And all of that was fine until 11 years old. My father sat me down on the couch. He's like, look, Jake, it's not working out. Me and your mom, we're going separate ways. You're now the man of the house.
Wow.
And, there's this, I forget what the phrase is in psychology, where you compartmentalize and you almost just forget. It's almost like selective amnesia. And I didn't remember exactly what he said until maybe 7, 8 years ago. He and I had a conversation about that, because in personal development, it's important that if you can forgive the person that you held hatred or resentment towards, and not for them, for yourself.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Also, if there's something there for them as well, you should, because the meaning I gave that event when I was 11 years old, and I'm 11 turning 12, testosterone's going to start kicking in. I had a lot of like hormones and all of this stuff. And I was just figuring out who I was in the world. And here now I have to be the man of the house. What does that mean? I just want to ride kids. I just want to ride bikes with.
Right.
So in that moment, I defined that event as a betrayal. My father betrayed me. He betrayed the family. If you really look at how you define things and the beliefs you create, your life it's steered based off of that. Like if I would have said my father abandoned me, I would have a totally different experience.
So that your life is steered by the meaning you give the events that happen.
Right. The meaning creates an emotion.
Okay.
And the emotion is so as I delved very deep into personal development, an event takes place you ascribe a meaning to the event.
Right.
And that meaning is going to create an emotion that is either going to bring you closer to your intended outcome or further from your intended outcome. I'm 11 years old. I don't have an intended outcome. I'm
Right.
just I'm just trying to figure out the world, right? So like at that moment, it was dad betrayed me. He betrayed the family. F you. I don't need you in my life. What do I need you for anyways? And it was more nothing to prove because my mother had enough love for me and the family, right? Like, and I never joined a gang, although I was in the street and I hung out with a lot of gang members. I was approached several times to join several gangs. I never did because I knew that people that join gangs typically don't have families.
Mhm.
And although my parents separated, my mother was enough family for me. My
Right.
brothers and sister, that was enough family for me. It's not like I didn't have a family. I was just learning how to cope in this new world where I didn't have an authoritarian figure like my mom. She was, but there's only so much she can do where she's working 7 days a week now.
Mhm.
So, and my thing at that age was like, if my mom has these Christian beliefs, and this is what she got. Why do I want to believe this? So I started to challenge the beliefs that I was raised with, and
Right.
I started to live a very self-serving life. So like if
It
people have,
starts to turn bad in a hurry when we go there. Yeah.
yeah, so I came in close contact with what's called karmic debt, where I might take something from someone. Okay. The moment they realize that their property has been stolen, there's an emotion that's created that's put out into the world.
Right.
And I am the genesis of that emotion. I created that emotion. So that the reverberation of that coming back on you is the karmic, that is like you paying your karmic debt. Now, me doing the things that I was doing at that age, I was doing all types of things, robbing cars and houses and all these other things. I knew that I was going to have to pay the piper at some point.
So even at that time, you had this realization, like in the back of your head, you realized at some point the gig was going to be up. At some point, you were going to have to pay.
Yeah, because, even people who like, I even think about it, like people who have committed their life to crime and stuff like that. In their mind, they know there's a few things that the eventual outcome is you're either going to be shot, you're going to die, or you're going to end up in prison.
Mm.
It's just a matter of when. If you're selling drugs, if you're doing this, the technology is so advanced now, everything is listening to you. Okay, so my father, betrayal, and I, the emotion that was created from betrayal, the meaning betrayal that I assigned to that event was initially it was confusion because man of the house, like what does that mean? And then
Yeah.
second, it
Yeah.
was like anger, and then it was hatred, and then eventually resentment
Right.
that would eventually like have bursts of rage in fights and stuff like that. So between the ages of 11 and 22, I got into enough trouble to send me to prison for 7.5 years. Now, I have always had
So
a
during
desire.
that time, so those 11 years, you spent 7 of those years in prison between 11
No,
and
I
22.
got into enough trouble in 11 to 22
Okay.
that I ended up going to prison for 7.5 years total between the ages of 18 and I was released when I was 29, 7.5 years between those ages. So, the way that I look at this, and I'm actually very happy that I had this experience because as men, I'm actually able to hold a conversation with men, and I've wondered why I'm like, it could be a billionaire, it could be somebody who's very well off. I have their captive attention when
Right.
I'm talking about certain things because if you haven't experienced something that has taken your, like, let's say, pushed the limits of your survival instinct on like a manhood type level, on a survival type level, there's almost kind of like for men, like a pondering or like just like a wondering of like what that would have been like
Like, what am I made of? And we don't know that
exactly,
if we haven't gotten
exactly,
that challenge.
right. You know, here I am, 18 years old, and then 19. I mean, I got into so many fights that they ended up reclassifying me as an adult while I was in a juvenile prison. And now here I am, 19 years old, 165 pounds soaking wet. And, you know, on average, these guys are 200 pounds or more.
Wow.
And, you know, I was fighting young men in the juvenile detention, and now I've got to fight like men.
Right.
So it was like, it was the experience of me like having to push myself in a physical fitness type like I was just focused on being fast and my strength. So I would always do like jumping jacks and push-ups, and even even in I spent a considerable amount of time in my first bit in confinement. I spent about a year in confinement.
Wow. In solitary confinement.
So some of it was solitary, some of it I
Okay.
had a roommate, which I
Okay.
preferred solitary, actually,
Okay. Interesting. Why did you
because
prefer solitary? I'm curious.
you got to piss and shit in front of somebody.
Okay. So just for the privacy.
That and this guy, I had 5 different cellmates that were murderers.
Yeah.
One guy had HIV, like, you know, like it's not like I want to share a room with these people, you
Right.
know. And it's 24 hours locked down, dude.
Wow.
Like 24 hours, 7 days a week.
Right.
We only left the cell 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for shower.
That's it.
You're out of the cell for 30 minutes to take a shower.
Wow.
And then you're back in there with this crazy person. So I'm 19 years old.
How does your mind not go crazy in that situation, Jake?
You know, I think God blessed me with like a spirit of mental toughness. I believe like there has to be something beyond, like it is not just me. Like, uh, you know, because I wasn't raised like in like the inner city ghetto. Like I wasn't. But when I moved to Miami, like it was kind of like lower middle class, and you could call some areas like kind of like ghetto, but it wasn't like in the hood.
Right.
So I did end up getting into a lot of fights in you know middle school and all of this other stuff, but it was nothing like what I experienced in prison.
Mm.
So the mental toughness thing came from me being 100% real about my experience. It's not, I'm in prison. You you don't have the option of like, hey, I don't want to do this. I don't want to fight this person. I don't want to like you fucked up
Right.
and you got to pay the piper and this is it.
Right.
Look, when I robbed the house and I was sitting in the police car after the guy got home, he was a Marine and he was yelling and I felt like shit. I felt like here it is. This guy works hard to feed his family, and I'm doing this dirtbag move. I wasn't raised like this. If this guy popped his back of the police car door open and pulled me out and beat the crap out of me, I deserve this beating, you
Right.
know. And but my life has spun out of control between the drugs, the parties, the amending the belief system, and all of these things that I didn't realize I had kicked Pandora's box open.
Right.
So I'm going to talk about something that the spiritually inclined understand. What you and I see is a fraction of what is going on around us. If you have sex with a woman who's promiscuous and she's all over the place and has undealt with trauma, you absorb this energy and you can take on what I call a hitchhiker in terms of like a demon or an entity that now is controlling you.
Right.
Drugs, doing needles, you're sharing needles, you are ingesting drugs, you're watching porn. These are all portals to allow these types of entities to enter in you and control and feed you stuff, thoughts, crazy thoughts, and now you become beholden to this energy that you have you've inadvertently agreed to.
Right. So part of
play.
this collective pain body that Eckhart Tolle calls it,
Right.
then latches onto us. Yeah.
Yeah, and even far sinister demons.
Yeah. Yeah.
They need a host.
Yeah.
And if you let's look at, for me, when I realized the game that I was playing that I didn't realize I was playing, is it's binary, right? Like you're either bringing people away from God into the darkness, or you're bringing them closer.
Right.
There's no middle ground. Like for a person like myself, I'm an extrovert. I'm very well connected. People like me. I love people.
Right.
And if I believe certain things, like my first, like the jail bid, like the first time I went to prison, I actually robbed the house, but I actually enlisted the help of a friend. So I went to go wake him up. And now we're both in jail.
Right. Right.
And it was my idea. So here it is. I have the experience of being a leader, but leading people in the wrong direction. So when I saw my friend Frank in the recreation yard after we in jail, like they put us in different cells, and now he's walking into recreation, I was like, Frank, I'm sorry, man. I got one more idea, and this one will work. And it was
Oh man. Of all
so
these
he's
movies
in
running in my
there.
head when I hear that line,
I got one more idea. This was gonna work. And I had already thought, like, I was already feeling bad. Like me, I did this, I'm gonna deal with it. But I was already feeling bad because he was just sleeping that day. I walked into his house, woke him up, I said, hey, come on, let's go. And now here we are, we're in jail. So I said, Frank, I am going to accept the time that they're offering me. Okay. And when I do this, you blame everything on me. Great. And he got out on probation. They wanted to let me out on house arrest, which I was already on house arrest, but I violated in 33 days for a technical violation because I forgot to get a receipt when I went shopping. They just put me into the room. They sent me back to jail. So they were going to try and send me back on house arrest, but for a longer period. But if I violate, I go to prison, and they enhance my sentence.
Right.
So I said, no, I don't want house arrest.
Right.
I don't want to be halfway free. When I'm free, I'm free. And until then, you give me the time that you're going to ascribe to me for whatever this is, and otherwise, well, there was no winning. I couldn't win that case because I was caught
Right. Right.
dead in the wrong. I was caught like right there at the house. And at that point, I was beyond running. I was beyond trying to escape. It was
Right.
like, the gig's up. You screwed up. Your life
But
is
that's a transition and mentally to say, okay, I'm going to shift the way I see it. Instead of telling myself I'm going to escape and I'm going to figure it out, I'm going to start to own it and then go forward from there.
I think ownership was the beginning of my rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm.
Accepting extreme ownership, like your mom didn't raise you like this. This is not who you are. And your life will not be like this in the future because this is not, it wasn't something I was comfortable. I would get high before doing a lot of these things just to kind of take off the edge,
Right.
Drink a beer and take half a Xanax or whatever.
So you could
And
numb your conscience, your voice a little bit more that knew what was right.
silence the voice.
Right.
But that voice is there and it's like, hey, I wouldn't do this. And I was like, well, I'm gonna do it. And I paid the price for silencing the voice.
Right.
So all the listeners, don't silence the voice.
Yeah, this still inner voice, we call it on here a lot, this God's voice or this connection to our higher self, to not silence that voice.
You want to amplify it.
Right. How do you do that?
I think living an ascetic life where humans don't need a lot. Like we don't need all these things that we live in a consumeristic society.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So we're trained and it's endorsed that we should have all of these things. But
Right.
what I've found is that some of the things that you sought to attain, you become owned by them.
Yeah.
You don't own them, but like, let's say you fought long and hard 10 years to get the Rolls Royce, but now everywhere you park it, you worry about somebody dinging your car, valet, you got to
Yeah.
do all these things like, and then it becomes this obsession where you're not even living a normal life anymore.
Right.
You're obsessed with this material possession that you're not going to take with you when you die.
Right.
It's learning to have the burning desire to achieve what you have set out to achieve, but still being content with where you are.
Oh, that's really well said. That's really well said. Being really content in the moment, appreciating the moment, and still at the same time holding what it is that is your burning desire for the future, what it is your purpose or your reason for being here.
Gratitude. And I'm going to give you like on my third bid, I was in Moorhaven Correctional Institution, which is it's a privately run institution by GeoCorp.
Okay.
Some people say, oh, privatized prisons, that's like Satan incarnate or whatever. Like, I had a more educational experience and a more safe experience in a privately run institution.
Interesting.
Now, on this third bid, which was DUI manslaughter, I got into an accident. I was 22 years old, drinking and driving, and somebody died. Right.
So that was, I was wondering, because at 19, you said you had this realization that you wanted to pay the piper and be done. And so you quit robbing and so forth, but it was a DUI manslaughter that got you in later till you were 29.
Well, I went to prison 3 times. So I went in when I was 18 years old for 2 years. I got out when I was 20. I went back in when I was like 22 for a fight in South Beach. So like, I'm not committing the same error. I'm just committing other errors.
Right.
And
right.
like, it wasn't like I went to prison and then I had this experience like, oh my God, I'm never doing anything again. Like,
Right.
I still wanted to live my life, but I amended certain things. Like, okay, I robbed a house. I'm never doing that again. I got out of prison.
Right.
Like, that was stupid. Like, look, you want to take from somebody who's working hard. What I realized, the karmic debt that comes from stealing is you won't escape that. And I wasn't raised that way. So this was just something learned behavior when I was doing drugs in a bad environment that wasn't conducive to like a healthy living. I was really fraternizing with kids that had the same pain, dealing with the same sort of traumas and stuff like that, that you get involved with this world. And I would commit the act, then justify, right? It's really the other way around. Like, you have to think, oh, does this make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. You don't do it. But I would commit the act, then justify the act. The accident is the one that obviously I regret the most. You know, I don't carry a lot of this with me because in terms of like, I've prayed to God. I've said,
you've done your repentance and
yeah, exactly. I've done several speaking events with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, in juvenile detention centers. I'm hopeful that in all of the speaking events that I've done through my experience, that I've been able to save somebody from making the stupid decision that I made that night. And now we have Uber, so it'd be really stupid to do that anyways. Back when I was 22 years old, we didn't have Uber. So now they say, Jacob, we're sentencing you to 15 years state prison. This was January 2nd, 2007. We're sentencing you to 15 years state prison. Upon you turning yourself in February 2nd, 2007, we're going to mitigate it to 5 years prison, followed by 5 years probation and permanent revocation of license. When she said that, I look at her, I look at him, I look at her, I look at him, my attorney, because my attorney never told me about that part.
Oh, wow.
Told me about all the rest. Like, right now we're in a courtroom. The jury's in the hallway. We have 2 options. I'm going to accept this plea, or we're going to pick jury members. We're taking this to trial. And I already studied the case law. I wasn't just paying this guy $30,000 to save me. I was studying the case law that governed my situation. And the case law that governed the Florida statutes is one, they had to prove that I was in operation of that vehicle, which upon impact, I was going 83 miles per hour upon impact. I hit a Toyota Highlander from the rear. I was driving a Mitsubishi Diamante. And I didn't even see this vehicle, whether it had their lights on or not. I don't know. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. And both my airbags are blown. And now my vehicle's faced a totally different direction. But the velocity sent me forward. The airbag and the seatbelt kept me in position, and the seatbelt cut my neck.
Sure.
They cut the seatbelt out of the vehicle, and that would put me in the vehicle. Two, by the operation of that vehicle, I was the cause or contributed to the bodily injury or fatality. And they could prove that. Number three, that I was impaired beyond my normal faculties or had a blood alcohol level of 0.08 or higher. I was kind of hinging on this one, but I didn't have a shot in the dark because when, the Florida Highway Patrol showed up, they're like doing their thing. And then he's like, you smell like alcohol. Have you been drinking? I said, I had a beer. He said, we're going to have to take blood. I was like, I have a phobia of needles. I don't do needles. He's like, look, we're going to do this one or two ways. You're going to give it to us or we're going to take it from you. And I wasn't going to make a bad situation worse.
Right.
And I just signed the paperwork, and then they just put the needle in my arm, the paramedic, and took the blood. So up until that toxicology report comes back, that is just an accident. Once the toxicology comes back, then it becomes a criminal investigation if the person is over the legal limit.
Right.
I was over the legal limit. Now I'm on my way to prison. I've got 30 days to situate my affairs before turning myself in. I thought about like leaving the country, but I had already dealt with that belief before agreeing to the 5 years, because I had already done 3 years in prison. And I had a meeting with my brothers, two brothers. And my youngest brother was like, Jake, I'd rather see you free somewhere else than here locked up.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of pain that I put my family through as a result of my choices, what type of big brother would I be if I ran?
Right.
Because I got into that accident. It was me.
Right.
If I ran, that's like saying I meant to do that. I didn't mean to do that. It was an accident.
Right.
And then what would I be teaching him in terms of responsibility? Right. So I left that meeting thinking, if I can get 5 years, man, I'll just jump on that. And that's what it ended up being. 5 years in and 5 years out means 5 years on probation. So February 2nd, 2007, I walk into the courthouse and just give them my hands, and they take me in to do that. So, I mean, there's not many people that, and I walked in there with my head high, and my spirits were right where I needed them, because my brother went to the University of Miami. He got a collegiate education. He made different choices, and I made different choices. And this is my school. That's what I framed it as. This is my school. I'm going to turn this into my university.
And you had that mindset already the day one when you were heading in there.
Yeah, because this is already my third bid.
Right.
So like it'd be more scary if I didn't know what I was going into.
Right.
I already done those 2 other bids, and my first one, nothing can compete with my first one. There was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of violence. And I looked online for a correspondence course, or any university that would do correspondence courses.
Right.
And I found Louisiana State University. So I told my attorney, please tell the judge to ship me somewhere here local and somewhere where they'd be able to proctor my exams. He's like, all right, I'll do my best. The court system and the Department of Corrections don't really communicate in that way. Like, I'm sure he did his best, but they ended up sending me to Rayford, Florida State Penitentiary. This is where they held Ted Bundy before they executed him. Dude, this was one of the eeriest prisons I've ever been, because I was now sleeping in a cell that somebody was sleeping in 24/7, like never left that cell until they took him out death row to execute them.
Wow.
Because they had the shower in the cell, you had the toilet, the sink, and then you have a little doorway that takes you through a little door. You have to kind of crouch through, walk out, and then you have this little patio area with the bars so you can see the stars. But this person would never leave this cell.
Wow.
But they changed it to uh, a work camp. So now all these guys like that they took the bars off the front, so now it's just like one corridor of like open cells. And now I'm picking carrots and corn and shit. Like in the movies, they got this guy out with this big, I forget what kind of gun it was, maybe an
Probably some
AR.
sort of shotgun or something, or
Yeah. And like they blow the whistle, you'd have to hit the ground. Like they're just doing things like crazy stuff like this. And so now I can't even further my education because I have Louisiana State University ready to start. But at this institution, there's nobody to proctor my exams. So now I had to do my research and development on the compound. Hey, look, I need to get to this institution. How do I do it? And I kept asking. And they're like, one guy's like, hey, look, if you pay this attorney in Tallahassee, they'll get you shipped to whatever institution you want to go. I was like, what? It was a big thing because they finally ended up catching that guy, but they caught him way after I had already got shipped. So I told my mom to take $4,500 of my money and pay this guy. He paid him. And then 2, 3 weeks later, I was on a bus to the institution I wanted to go to.
wow.
So I've always been resourceful in that manner. Like, let's figure out how to get stuff done. So that's probably on the once we get to the business side of things, that'll help enlighten people on how I've been able to reach certain levels of success. But I'm finally at this institution. Now I'm taking this intro to psychology. I love psychology. I want to understand how the human mind works. I want to understand my brain so I can fix it.
Right.
Right. And I'm at this institution. I want to every other time that I was incarcerated, the 2 years, I ended up maxing out, meaning doing 100% of my time. If I get good behavior, I get out 85%. But that prison bit, I didn't care if I got out early or not because I had to fight and I wasn't going to just think about that part. Like I had to protect myself. I had to. And then second one, I was going to try and go home early. I ended up getting into a fight and I lost my game time. The third time, I'm like, I am going home early this time. I was going to try and avoid any challenges in that regard. And one day the officers come to my cell and I really haven't done anything and they're just start searching my cell for no reason. And I was like, man, maybe if I knew what you guys were looking for, I could help you find it. He didn't say anything. And then they end up packing my stuff up and they take me to the captain. The captain says, we're putting you under investigation. I said, for what? So we don't have to tell you. I said, I mean, you're putting me in for a reason. I mean, I would like to know. Take him away. So now I'm in handcuffs and they're escorting me into the solitary confinement cell. So you get handcuffed by the back and then they open the door. They close the door. They pop the flap. Now I have to stick my hands outside of the flap so they can uncuff me. They uncuff me and now I'm sitting in this room all by myself. Now, I have a few choices, but my brain already started to work. And Tony Robbins, I did a lot of Tony Robbins work. Tony Robbins talks about a primary question that's typically governing your life.
Yep.
If as a child you sought the love of your father, and your father always just kind of was very emotionally restricted with you, just gave you emotion when you did good things. In your mind, it might have created something like, am I making the right choice right now? Does he love me? Or
Right.
am I being accepted and creating these things? My primary question at this moment was, blessed by God, was how can I find meaning in this? Like, how can I find meaning? And this is going on subconsciously. Okay, meaning in this. Okay, I'm studying this psychology. In psychology, in this intro to psychology, there's a term called relative deprivation. Relative deprivation is when you or I compare ourselves to the person that has the Mercedes we want to drive,
Right.
has the house that we want, has the job that we want, has the career, has the real estate investments we want. And when we compare ourselves to this person, we feel inadequate, less
Yeah,
than.
we have a gap. Yeah.
So that gap creates feelings of unworthiness, of inadequacy. I was like, all right, relative deprivation. Well, what would be the opposite of that?
Exactly.
Relative abundance. So like, and now I'm thinking like, okay, how many people are on the planet? At this time, there's probably like 6.8 billion, let's say 7 billion people.
Right.
So 7 billion people, there's 300 million Americans. Okay. Let's grossly overestimate and say there's 2 billion people on the planet that are afforded the luxuries that we're afforded here in the United States and abroad. 2 billion.
Right.
That leaves 5 billion people on the planet. And let's say 4 billion of them have to worry about like clean water,
Right.
food,
Yep.
clothes,
Yep.
basic needs, right? The most basic needs. I would say probably like not all 4 billion people would trade places with me here in this solitary confinement cell, but I am pretty certain that at least 2 billion people would want the room service that's going to be delivered to that flat 3 times a day.
Yeah.
This bed with this mat and blanket, the water that's coming out of that sink, the roof over my head. So I was able to take this moment that could have been classified as one of the top 5 traumatic experiences in my life, and I was able to find gratitude in the moment. And then flipping that allowed me the ability to build on every other situation in my life from that moment.
That's awesome. I just a few weeks ago listened to a guy talk, William Irvine, and he had that exact same example of, he called it trans life meditation, looking at somebody else's life instead of looking up. Look at everybody that would be super happy to trade their life for yours in an instant, no matter how bad you think your life is. And it was amazing how that stuck with me so differently. I mean, I've done a lot of gratitude practice and so forth, but how that process stuck with me. It's been maybe 4 weeks ago, and I've had maybe one down day since then, when maybe I used to have 2 per week or something. Because it's really, all I have to do is like look around and say, wow, I'm living my dream life now. I didn't realize it before. I realized it because I've realized how many other people would dream of my life. You know, that there's 2 or 5 billion people out there, but even if it's just a billion, there's 2 billion people that would love immediately trade their life for mine. And then I get to look around and think, wow. And it really is, that gratitude is really wonderful. It was really wonderful. That's cool. You came with the same thing. And that, what, like, where did that come from? Where did you feel that? I mean, because most people, I mean, I don't know that many people that have been in solitary confinement, but I can't imagine that would be the thing that comes to mind of most people. Most people would be bitching about going into solitary confinement.
Yeah, I've read studies where 3 concurrent days in solitary confinement for most people would have long-lasting effects in terms of
Mental health breakdown and
psychological well-being. I don't know if it's just my character disposition, or even by myself, I'm able to kind of keep active. Even if I don't have books, I can, like, my mind can go places. My mind can take me places.
right.
We have this agency of the mind. How it's used in our day-to-day lives now is governed by our responsibility and the technology that we're using right now. So I was blessed with the ability to tap into things that it was involuntary, but I said, you know, I read the Bible cover to cover on my first bid. Jesus, Joseph, they spent a lot of time. A lot of these guys spent a lot of time in solitude.
Yes.
This was a part of their process of enlightenment, a process of connecting with God. So mine was involuntary, but I wasn't going to squander that opportunity.
Wow. That's amazing to have that outlook.
So God blessed me with that insight and that wisdom, even at that young age that I was. It was an opportunity that I was strengthening my character beyond that of any other person. I mean, we have tons of people that will push themselves, but most people will not willingly subject themselves to something that traumatic or crazy.
Right.
Now, it wasn't a willingness, it was a lack of, let's say, like I veered away from, I have an intimate understanding with the value set that makes sense for me.
Right.
And like Sam Bankman-Fried, right? Like this guy who just recently went, he has no experience with prison. So like he didn't have like the, let's say, the previous experience to say, hey, look, I definitely don't want to do anything that would get me in a place like that. There's no previous experience.
Right.
Like mine is like, hey, you basically made a lot of decisions outside of the value set that you were raised with.
Right.
And you paid the consequences of.
Yep.
Now, for you to continually make decisions that would put you in the same situation is beyond masochistic. There's something severely wrong with you.
Right.
So for most people, the third time me going back to prison was like, forget Jake, he's just lost it,
Right.
we don't.
Yeah.
And
your family write you off at this time as well, or were they still supportive?
My mom didn't, I don't believe that my brothers really did either. They just wanted me to be free and healthy and happy and make better choices.
Right.
And yeah, so no.
I am curious. You had mentioned before when we talked, Jake, about this staring death in the face at one point.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious about that because I think you had talked earlier about what it takes to be a man, and the challenges of what does it mean to be a man. And my own thinking is that until we have embraced the fact of our own mortality in some visceral way where we can feel it, I don't think that we can be fully alive without having had that experience, even as contradictory as that seems. But I'm really curious to see what your experience was like with that and how that impacted your trajectory.
I was 18, 19 years old, first bid, and going to prison for robbing houses. And I'm sitting in a confinement cell. I just fought somebody. And I'm alone in this confinement cell. And I was like, man, this really sucks. This sucks bad. Like, what if I just end it? Like, what don't I? And I was like, all right, if you're gonna end it, like, how do we do this? So I, at that point, would have to figure out how to get cigarettes or stamps, and then I would pay the trustee who's also an inmate, but like passes the trays out. So prison is like you can get anything you want if you can be resourceful enough, right? And I would have to figure out how to get cigarette or stamps, and then I would have to figure out like to pay him to bring me a razor to shave my face, because you're supposed to shave not in confinement, but on the on general population, you have to be clean shaved. So, all right, he brings you the razor, and the officers walk around every hour, once an hour. And the officer would walk by and I slip my left wrist and bleed out. Like, maybe an hour is good enough for that.
Right.
I said, well, how do I know where I'm going is going to be better than where I am?
Mm-hmm.
That was the first thing. And then the other thing was really an internal monologue with the drill sergeant of my mind, and said, wait a minute. You mean to tell me you would end your suffering and create more suffering in the lives of your family, your mother, your brother, your sister? You little bitch, you better man the fuck up.
Right.
Language, but that was exactly how I spoke to myself. And it was almost like I got like upright, like I never thought about that again. So,
and did that, was that the end of the story, or did that process, did that conversation that you have, did that continue to impact you in the way that you interacted with life?
Yeah. So the following conversation was, all right, through a series of really bad choices, you're here. You have created this hell.
Right.
And if you have created this hell, you can create your own heaven. How do you do that? So that was the genesis of that conversation. And it wasn't fully formed at that moment because I was still 18, 19, and still dealing with a lot of other things. But that was the beginning of that whole understanding of what's
Of like,
possible.
if I got here by my choices, then I can also choose differently.
I can also choose differently to get me to
A different place.
the heaven I would want to live in. I've created this hell. So, and then, fast forward, I'm 29 years old, getting out of prison for the last time. I've got $10,000 saved up because I was in a work release center where you're in prison, but you get to go to work and then you come back. And I took an over the phone sales job, and I was selling relocation services for a moving company, one of the largest moving brokers in the country. And I got really good at it. Always been great at sales and communication and public speaking. Actually, I hadn't done any public speaking at that moment, but actually, I'm going to go before that. Before I got this job in like 2010, in 2008 or 9, I was like 26 years old. I bought Tony Robbins' book, Awakening the Giant Within. I bought this book with a pack of cigarettes. I traded a pack of cigarettes for this book.
Oh, in prison. Okay.
Yeah, well, cigarettes and food are currency.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah. Okay.
so I bought this book, and then I'm reading the book, and then I'm doing everything the book tells me to do. Write down my contribution goals, my toys and adventure goals, my relationship goals, and personal goals. And one of the goals that I wrote down was to master the art of public speaking. And I wrote down a ton of other goals, but I put a lot of intent into this and visualization. I have plenty of time still incarcerated after that to kind of like visualize my goals. And about a year later, I get transferred to this work release center, and there's another inmate in there named Lance. We're still friends today. He reaches out to Toastmasters.
Yep.
Have you heard? Yeah.
Yep. I know Toastmasters. Yep.
So Toastmasters is a group where you enhance your ability to communicate publicly. And Toastmasters agrees to bring a chapter of Toastmasters into the work release center. And I was just like blown away, and even more blown away when I was the first person called. I had nothing to do with bringing this into the institution. I had nothing to do with being the first person called. The first person in that chapter ever to be called to speak was me. Jake, to the podium. You're going to speak on the use of the bayonet in the Civil War. Go.
Wow.
So I'm in front of 30 guys, and I got to kind of ad lib the use of the bayonet in the Civil War. Well, the bayonet is a long rifle. You've got a knife at the end. You run out of bullets. You can jab somebody with it, or you can throw it as a spear. But if you do that and they still have bullets, you probably got a problem. And it was, as I'm having this, I'm speaking in front of these people, I'm like also having the realization that I created this. So I'm also understanding the power of being intentional with what you want, and then the process of manifesting, realizing. And then also in the brain, there's a reward center. There's like, you have to learn the process of rewarding yourself for achievements, because high achievers typically achieve something and they're like, okay, I did it. And we're just so ready to charge on to the next
Right.
thing.
What's next? Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot what it's called, but there's a name for it where it just reinforces something. So there's a lot of power when you're hitting certain achievements in figuring out something that you enjoy doing to reward yourself.
Right.
Just do something.
Right.
Because you're training the brain to find more things to reward yourself for. But something that is similar, it's not exactly that reward center, is the RAS, the reticular activating system. Yep. You've been wanting a red Porsche forever. You buy one, and then somehow you start seeing red Porsches everywhere. There's not they haven't been selling more red Porsches
No,
lately. You just notice
your
them.
attention changes, your focus changes. Absolutely. Yep.
Exactly. So if your focus could be one thing, my focus could be one thing. We read the same book and we pull different
Sure.
information.
Yep.
So the key is to understand these aspects of the mind and tailor make what you would like to grab and store as resources for where you're heading.
Right.
A lot of people get mad at life for providing what life is providing them by default because they haven't decided. And what you have in your subconscious is governing. What I realized sitting in prison, I say, okay, are you a masochist? I'm asking myself. You're in prison for the third time. You're not really that bad of a person. You're making
Right.
bad choices, but you have friends that have made way worse choices and they don't have the life you have. What is wrong? And I started to analyze everything: the people I hung out with, the music I listened to, the places I would go, the substances I would use, everything. And I realized, okay, the people, I'm going to have to evolve
Yep.
in terms of my
Yep.
friend now. The music, I wasn't privy to this. And I really feel bad for a lot of young people. And I don't have any children, but I also think about this when I do have kids. It's filth.
Yep.
It it is it is the lyrics on some of this music is so disgusting, and it's
Yep.
just it's it's corrosive.
Yes, absolutely.
So I realize when I'm listening to some of this music, because you can have a radio in prison, but you're listening to just regular AM, FM radio stations. But I listened to the lyrics, and it was just like, all right, I was raised by women. I would never use the B word in reference to a woman. I would
Yeah.
just never.
Especially one you're having a relationship with. I mean,
Exactly. So here I am listening to music that objectifies women, glorifies violence, the sale and usage of drugs. I was like, what am I doing?
yeah. What am I feeding into my mind, which creates
What
everything?
am right? The beats are catchy.
Yeah.
Like the music is like kind of like it has a certain rhythm that's like, yeah, this is cool. But then, you're dancing at the club, you're drinking, and unbeknownst to the people that are listening, especially if you're driving or whatever, you're typically in a theta state and it makes it to your subconscious.
Yeah. Because of that great beat, because it's getting you in that where you're receptive to information
Yeah.
in that state, right?
So I see the subconscious as like a record player, and there's a record on that record player, and that record is spinning. Now, some of those grooves you put there, most of those grooves you didn't, but that record player is going to spin, and your conscious life is just going to be a manifestation of the grooves that are on that record while it's spinning. Now, you might have a lot of frustration, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress in your life because your conscious pursuit is in conflict with what you have on those grooves of that record player.
Right.
A lot of
Right.
people say, well, how do you rewrite the grooves? There's a lot of, you can do meditation, there's prayer, everything that I do that has ever shifted my mentality has to do with training physical fitness, like gym, like all throughout. If you were to say, Jake, what is the one North Star that like obviously God and my mom, but outside of God and my mom, or like outside of me and actions I'm taking, what are the actions? I was always training. I've always been training since I was 16 years old.
Right.
So I would go 2 months without taking a day off sometimes because like I would just work out different muscle sets.
Right.
So that over time were habits. First we form our habits and then our habits form us.
Yep.
So the habit of training, if I were to say, like, if somebody would say, can you sum up how you went from, multiple times in jail, 3 times in prison, addicted to drugs, and to where you are now? It was first, I would push myself physical fitness wise. And even in my darkest times, or even on drugs or whatever, I would still hit the gym. But it came to a point where like your behavior is not in alignment with what your health goals are.
Right. So you have to choose one or the other at some point.
Right. So it becomes a choice. Do you want to be the healthiest you could be, or do you want to compromise that and just go down this road of self-indulgence through drugs?
Yeah.
Like, what is more important to you?
Right. It forces you to choose.
Exactly. So vision gives pain a purpose. And pain in the moment, I will take that any day of the week for pain, permanent pain.
Right. Compared to permanent pain. Take a small pain now compared to a permanent pain later.
Going cold turkey if you're a heroin addict, that temporary pain to alleviate a life's worth of pain is worth it.
Right.
What other areas have you committed to where, so the blessings I have is.
Can we pause on that one a minute? I want to let that soak in for our listeners. Vision gives pain a purpose.
Right.
Right. So if you're in pain and you can have the vision to look forward and see how that pain is going to serve you and you find purpose in it, then you can withstand it. You can endure it. Is that the right understanding, or what would you add to that, Jake?
I would add that without a, like even in the Bible it says, without a vision, people will
perish. Yeah.
So it doesn't mean you're going to die, but anything that you could potentially be would be dead already because you haven't decided. So life will provide you by default what you haven't decided. So if you decide, like people just go through life, they're like, oh, I don't have time to do a vision board, or I don't have time like
to exercise or work out. Or
you have time to figure out how you're going to ask your boss for a promotion after you've been working there for 7 years and you haven't gotten a raise. You have time to think about that. You have time to think about these, coming so close to like my mortality at such a young age, asking myself existential questions at such a young age allowed me the ability to just kind of understand that my life in the grand scheme of things will be relatively inconsequential.
Right.
Unless I choose to make it otherwise. I mean, we are sitting on a rock hurtling through space that's traveling through space at 66,000 miles orbiting the sun, right? Like, and we're spinning on our axis, tilting 23.5 degrees this way, 23.5 degrees this way. This has been going on long before Jake Cortez entered this planet. This has been going on.
And it will be going on long after he leaves it.
Long after. Why do I think, or why should I be so arrogant to think that the world begins and ends with me?
Right.
That I am the center of the universe. I'm not.
Right.
Right? Like I get to play a part as a human in one of the best times to be alive in all of human existence.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm going to sit here and cry because my Uber Eats can't find my house. Like,
puts things in perspective, for the other 2 billion or 5 billion or whatever, but it really does. Yeah. It's amazing,
In the grand scheme of things, our first world problems are laughable.
Yeah.
You've got families that have got it really, really hard, like we have our challenges here in the United States. Fine. There isn't any country that's without them. Still the best place to live in the world. And more millionaires are made in this country than anywhere in the world.
And I've lived a lot of places and I can back that up, man. I've always come back here and I've had opportunities to settle down in other places, in other regions of the world. And like, nope, I like visiting. I like the experience. I like learning from the culture. I like, living here, but I never would want to stay here, somewhere else.
Yeah.
So definitely the case.
So my goal became, how do I get to a place where I never have to worry about money again? And then I started to shift. I've had an evolutionary journey in the world of income, and I've always been like a salesman, like a subcontractor, really. Like I just work for the company and close sales, make my money, you make your money, and we're good. And I got really, really good at it. So when I was a high-powered salesperson looking for a job, I was like, look, this is what I want to make. How much revenue do I have to bring the company to make this amount? They'd tell me, and then that's where I'd start my journey from. And I'd kind of keep that benchmark until I grew and ran my own call center and jumping into real estate investment in these last 3 years. which I like this space more than most because it's more in alignment with how I think. It's just the proper allocation of resources, my time, my energy, my attention, my money, um, which for those listening, that's an acronym, team. You got to protect your team. Time, energy, attention, money. Time, energy, attention, money.
I
We
like that.
live,
I haven't heard that one before. That's good. That's really good. I mean, the attention is so important, right? It's so important today, and we give our attention away freely, and that's what the whole. We're way past the knowledge economy. It's now the attention economy,
it
and
is.
and we give it away, thinking we're getting something, but we don't realize we're giving our most important asset away.
We are, and we live in a society that's kind of like geared more towards entertainment.
Exactly. That's where we
So
give our attention.
people can lose themselves in this entertainment so quickly. But some of the things that I took from my experience that have helped me on my journey is being extremely resourceful. Um, Tony Robbins says it all the time that people don't fail for a lack of resources, they fail for a lack of resourcefulness.
Right.
One of the reasons why I've always wanted in a personal relationship, like my girlfriend, she's from Venezuela, my ex-wife was from Ukraine. I've always kind of been drawn to people who understand the opportunities here.
Right. Right.
And neither of them were born here. And the only way that you can see opportunities somewhere is if you're coming from a place where you didn't have them.
Yeah.
My girlfriend was born in Venezuela, and the situation there is pretty grim,
It's
right?
unthinkable. Yeah.
But like people that were born here and raised here can't see the opportunity that's all around them because this is all they've ever known.
Right.
So how do you see something if you've just been surrounded by it all your life but never trained to notice it, right? So traveling was one of the things that I desired to do a lot. And in 2016, when I got off of probation, 6 days later, I was in Greece, and then I was in India, and then Costa Rica, Abu Dhabi, and I went to like 15 different countries because I wanted to experience the world on their terms, not American terms, on their terms,
Right.
understand the culture
Yep.
and how to get around, and and Cuba, and like people come here and they love how much opportunity there is. The tricky part is to what extent do you trade your family bonds and all of this stuff for your desire to achieve? And it shouldn't be a trade-off if you do things right. Because my strategy went from like sales and building a company sales focused to investment. Like I'm going to acquire enough assets where my assets will fund my liabilities and have a surplus, and that rinse and repeat every month. I know that I can expect this amount of money.
Yep.
This is my personal liabilities. And now I have a surplus that I can take this surplus and reinvest the difference.
Yep.
Now I have earned the right at this point, if I so choose to chase my passions.
Right.
Chase your
Right.
passion. I think it's foolish. It's foolish to say that to people because what if your passion is quilting? Like can somebody make a lot of money? Yeah. But for me, I'd rather do something that's going to tried and true get me the results I seek in terms of my financial goals, like real estate investment. In my case, mobile home parks. I own the dirt. You pay me every month for the dirt. I don't have to get a phone call at midnight about a toilet not working because you
Right.
flushed on down the toilet, right? Like we own the dirt, you pay for the dirt. And all we got to do is maintain the landscaping and the trash. I'm looking for the highest output for the minimum, like the least amount of input. Now, there is high input in the beginning, getting some of these things zoned, that all that legwork. If you're able to get over that hump, it's one of the best asset classes in terms of like cash flow that I have encountered.
Right. Right. No, and I think on the passion or purpose, I mean, it's necessary to get you started, and it can be just hunger, right? If you're starving, then you're motivated because you got to feed yourself, right?
Right.
But I think it's an important, like when I think of my own kids right now, that the need to have something that they see as worth fighting for, something that they see as worth going after, right? Because unlike me, my kids had a pretty uncomfortable upbringing, right? And then to find something that they feel like, as you said earlier, the vision that they're driving for, right, for their life is really important, and it can be something that doesn't have an obvious economic value to start with to get the steps down the trail in the right direction. I was thinking about like of all of your experience, which is amazing experience, Jake, and I really appreciate you sharing it with us. But I was trying to think about for myself, where does it look like was the tipping point? Like when was the transition point that your life went from going, as you said earlier, going in the wrong direction to going in the right direction? Is there some place that you can pinpoint where you started, even if the outcomes weren't perfect, even for a while, but where the trajectory changed from going sort of downhill to going uphill, if you will, or toward the
18
life?
years old. 18 years old, but I still went to prison twice after that. So it was just like the decision was made, but I had already set some crazy stuff in motion, and I was committed to a better life. I was committed to not being a bad son, like sitting in prison,
So
you know.
what was the moment? Take us to the moment when you're 18 years old. What was the moment where it tipped, where the transition was?
Well, the biggest one was like my mom, she drove 9 hours to see me from Miami to like Chipley, Florida. I'm now in a confinement cell, what they call closed management. Closed management is like one of the highest custody levels you can have. Closed management two. Closed management one is like it doesn't get any higher than that. Closed management one, you're in solitary confinement for a year before you go up for reviews. Closed management two, you have a cellmate, but you go for a review every 6 months. And I was in there because I sent another inmate at another institution to the hospital. It was a really bad fight. It was really bad, and I kind of wanted to make sure that this guy never forgot me because he was cheating in spades, and prison is all about respect. And I didn't realize what I was doing at the moment in terms of how severe the consequences would be. But now here I am, 19 years old, being shipped to an adult prison. I'm 165 pounds, soaking wet, and you got these guys that are like 200 pounds plus, on the door, cat calling me like I'm Beyonce. And
Right.
I realized that I really made a like in my mind is like, oh, you wanted to go to another institution, huh? So here you are now, like
Congratulations.
you really did it this time. You really did it this
So
time.
when
And
your mom came to see you,
my mom came to see me,
she took that
and
9 hour drive up to see you, and that was a tipping point. What flipped in your mind? What did you do differently at that point?
well, she came to see me, but instead of her having like a regular visit, she couldn't even hug me, and we only got like a 30-minute visit because I just finished fighting my cellmate earlier that week. So now, not only am I on closed management too, but I'm in administrative confinement. So like I'm in confinement in long-term confinement. So I laugh now because I mean it's just such a far place from where I am today. Like just to even think about I was there, but she couldn't see me. She fought. She basically told the officers, "Please, I just drove 9 hours. Please let me see my son." And she couldn't even give me a hug or anything. And then I go back to the cell and I say, if anybody'd hurt my mom, I'd hurt them, and here I am hurting her the most. I want to be a better son,
Mhm.
you know. And I said, what does it mean to even really be a man? What does that even mean? Because fighting all these people for respect and all of this stuff, this will be forever. Like I'll just fight another guy, fight another guy, fight another
Right.
guy. This is this is not what being a man is about. This is not what being a man about. What is it? And I came to the conclusion that it's being there for your family, providing and protecting and being there for your family. And I wasn't doing that.
Then at
So
first, then in your case, the first step was to stop causing the harm because you were causing
uh,
pain and suffering for your mom.
hurt people hurt people.
Yep. Yep. So this was a tipping point. So if you hadn't had that transition, that realization that, hey, I would be really upset if anybody's hurting my mom, and I'm doing it. So now, and married with what you said earlier about when I recognize that I'm here because of the choices I made, then I can also choose otherwise. Like there are things I can do differently.
Right.
If you hadn't had that realization there, where do you think your life would have ended up?
Yeah, I would be dead due to drug overdose for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that's, and I think that, and I'll say this to all of our listeners out there. I think whether it's physically dead or emotionally dead, all of us have tipping points. And if we take the sort of the path of least resistance, if you kept ignoring the fact that you were hurting your mom, you would have ended up physically dead.
Yeah.
But all of us, if we're ignoring what it is our purpose is here to do, or we're not treating the people in our life right, we are eventually numbing or killing our emotions, and we become what Benjamin Franklin said, like living these lives of quiet desperation where we die at 25 and our body catches up at 65.
Right.
So it's not, you had a very stark example, which I think a lot of people can learn from, but I encourage everybody to think about that on their own life, where it's currently taking them. What path are they on? I have a question for you. Do you feel, Jake, I mean, that was a very big transition. You've had lots of other ones. Will transitions or changes in life ever stop, or will they continue?
No. And I don't want them to stop.
Okay. And what's one you're looking forward to right now? What's another one that you're looking forward to? Another change in the trajectory of your life that you're looking forward to?
Taking my net worth to, above, taking my net worth to like 10 million.
Yeah.
The mindset, like how you carry yourself, the walk, talk, your value set, like your habits, there's always areas to improve and upgrade. If like, somebody could have it all together in business, but their relationship life might not be the best, or vice versa. It's a matter of being able to kind of be fluid enough, because what works in business doesn't work in a relationship. You can't just go home and just try to solve everything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The relationships obviously are much more important. But I think if I heard right between the lines there, Jake, it's about, to become the kind of person that can have a 10 million net worth.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, because for me, it's not about the 10 million, it's about who I am. Because a lot of people don't realize that if tomorrow they get everything that they think that they want,
You're right. The car, the money, the house, whatever, the spouse, whatever.
Yeah, it's all there. You got it. You drive it, you live it. It has nothing to do with your internal fulfillment. Like, it doesn't make you, like, maybe it amplifies a little bit of who you are, but money just makes you more of who you already are. Right. It doesn't, so if you're an asshole to begin with, you're just going to be more of that.
Yeah. And people are going to be different to you because they want something from you, right? And allow you to be more of an asshole.
Exactly. So it's more of the becoming part that becomes exciting for me, because it's what other things can I learn to do, or can I take up that is going to form new neural networks in my brain. Like, I am probably more receptive to change than most people as a result of my life experience. Between 6th and 11th grade, I was in 7 different schools.
Right.
Like, I learned to adapt very well, and I learned to just become resourceful as a result of my situation. It becomes what would, because that's also a part of the quotient of intelligence, is one's ability to adapt. Because, like, let's say you take an IQ test here in the United States and you test off the charts, you're super intelligent. Like, what happens if we put you in the Sahara in Africa? Are you going to be able to kill and eat your food? Like, are you going to figure it out?
Right.
I mean, because it would take a certain level of intelligence to be able to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does it translate? So I just kind of see intelligence as one's ability to adopt things that will enhance your capability to successfully reach your targets, and your ability to adapt.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, adaptability is right. The survival of a species, right? It comes from adaptability, not from how strong you are today, but how you can change and how resilient you can be, right? How can you manage things that are up and down? No, I think that makes a lot of sense. If you could give one tool from your, I mean, it is, let's be honest, Jake, it's an amazing experience. It's a very unusual experience that you've had, not each piece of it, but the whole thing together is very unusual. If you could give our listeners one tool that you would recommend they start using today to start to drive their life in the direction to make their transitions good ones, to take the changes life is giving them and make their best life out of it, what would that one tool be?
Create a crystal clear vision of you 3 years from now. Make it crystal clear the house you're walking into, the job you want, the investments you want. Make sure that that vision for yourself is so crystal clear, because your RAS is going to pull in the things that will help you achieve what you have set out and you have already created in your mind's eye. So that is one of the most powerful things. Now, one of the things that you want to do before this is, if there is someone that you have not forgiven, or there's hatred and resentment that you harbor against somebody, we can't hit these heights without having that clean inner, hatred and resentment rot the container that keeps it.
Right. I love that. Yeah.
These insidious emotions are dense. And whether it was something that you believe to be unforgivable, or you don't believe that you should let this person off the hook, do yourself a favor and let yourself off the hook.
That's right. You're doing it for you, not for them. Yeah.
Yeah. You get one shot at this life. Really? Like, you get 100 years on this planet. Maybe
if we're lucky, right? Maybe 60, maybe 100, right?
Right. So it then becomes a question when you're on your deathbed, and Les Brown said this, and I think that it helped open up my eyes. You're on your deathbed, you're on your way out of this realm of existence, and you have every talent, you have every skill, you have every gift that you have that's around your deathbed, and they're saying like, we came for you and you didn't use us. Like, what is it that you are blessed with that you're not tapping into? What gifts do you have that you're not utilizing? What skills do you have that you're not pushing the potential of? Like, we get into this habit just forced with responsibilities and obligations and all of these things, that we never take the time to create the man or woman. And it's the most important thing. Like, this is where
absolutely I agree. I mean, creating the man or woman, the human being that we were put here to be, is our primary job. And you're saying really became two tools, if you will. One is to set a clear vision of where it is that you want to be in 3 years, very detailed, clear vision, but at the same time to clean yourself as well. If there's resentments that you're harboring, if there's angers, if there's things that you're harboring toward other people, to let those go, to allow you to get to where it is you want to go.
You can't step into the new identity if the old one is harboring resentments. That is like, this is your key to the next. Like, you have to forgive. Like, I forgave my father, I forgave a lot of people, and I no longer look at it as something who did something to me.
Right.
Thank you for the blessing of this lesson that you've afforded me. What have I done? Like, what area of my life have I not thought through that I allowed this event to transpire?
Right.
Even in business, some things go wrong with a partnership. Sometimes I'll thank the person verbally or not, and sometimes I'll just do it mentally, for showing me the areas in my approach that are not efficient.
Right. I like that saying. Says everybody in every interaction we have, it's either a warning or an inspiration, and either one can be used well, right? How to be or how to not be, and either one we can use that. We can put the purpose to the pain if it's on the bad side, and then make a vision out of it, right? Make that by having that vision. Jake, where can people find out more about you? Where can people find out where Instagram, you're doing, what other good work you're doing?
Instagram, YouTube, my website, jakecortez.com. It's Jake Cortez on Instagram. It's official Jake Cortez on YouTube. Yeah, and if there's any part of this podcast that has resonated with you, I'd love to hear what resonated with you the most. And my main thing is that with my life experience, that I can help provide people, as much as I can so that they can potentially prevent from ending up in a situation like I had, and to use the tools that I had to figure out along the way to achieve the life that I'm now living and the life that I'm creating.
Now that's awesome. Jake, I'm really grateful for you being here with me today. I'm really inspired by two things. One is your vulnerability and being open and sharing your experience. And two, I still haven't figured this out yet, but like how you turned at such a young man where you made the transition from victim to blaming to owning your situation and then being on the right track to go forward. I mean, at a very young age in a very difficult circumstance. So I'm really inspired by that. I really appreciate that. I hope that it also inspires the rest of our listeners. And as you said, they can check you out on a lot of different places. Thank you so much again, Jake, for being with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Art.
I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.